Mother's Day to all of you mothers out there, especially mine. I have the privilege of introducing our speaker today. Sean Dietrich is a columnist and novelist known for his commentary on life in the American South. He has appeared in the Tallahassee Democrat, the Mobile Press Register, South Magazine, Yellowhammer News, Thomasville Magazine, and he has authored 5 books. In his spare time, he is a mediocre salesman, sailor and fisherman, a biscuit connoisseur, and barbecue competition judge. When he's not writing, he spends much of his time aboard his 14-foot sailboat, the SS Squirrel, along with his coonhound, Ellie Mae. On a personal note, Sean and I married into the same enormous family, and we found each other through a sea of Martins. And although we are only related by marriage, somehow, some way, we decided that we have to be blood kin. And it is my honor and my privilege today to introduce to you one of my very favorite people and soon to be one of yours, Mr. Sean Dietrich.
Well, this is a fine how to do. Can y'all hear me? All right. I just spoke in Marianna, Florida, not so long ago, to a room full of 8th graders, and it was the worst experience of my entire life. It was like looking at a brick wall, and every joke that I told, because I do have a few, just landed flat right in the middle of the room and died a slow death. So I hope we have a little better time here. The first time that I sang the doxology in Brewton, by the way, I'd like to say, made a note. I would like to thank Mary Ellen, Miss Barbara, and Miss Connie for the music this morning. Give them a hand if you would. I've played music in church for a long time. Since I was about 9 years old, since I've been playing the piano. And I know what good music in church is like. Like I was going to say, when I sang the doxology in Brewton, we were out at Keego, and I was with the Sea of Martins. And a little old woman about yay high came up to me and she said, "I'd like you to sing the doxology for this entire group of people." Her name, I would learn later, was Aunt Catherine. She didn't want no for an answer, so I stood up in front of everybody, and what we'd learned in choir when I was growing up was if you don't know the words, you just sing watermelon, watermelon, watermelon. I didn't quite know the words of the doxology without the hymnal in front of me, so about midway through, between praise God from whom all blessings flow, watermelon, 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 and I have never lived that down. A lot of people want to know who I am, especially in Brewton. I got a few ways to tell you who I am. One, I'm Brother Cavan across the street. I'm his cousin by marriage. Two, you could call me the complicated version. I am Willard and Leon's sons, Steve Nelson, Carolyn Nelson's, daughters, husbands, cousin by marriage. There'll be a test on that when this is over. Brewton is a place I like to pretend that I'm from, even though I'm from Walton County. That's where I claim. I've lived there the longest. But Brewton has embraced me from the very first time, that very first time I sang Watermelon out in Keego instead of the most beloved, cherished hymn in the hymnal. I feel like I'm an adopted son of this place. There's something here that is special. And I'd like to tell you a few stories about people here who are special. When they asked me to speak on Mother's Day, my first response was, this town has really fallen into the pits of despair. If they're calling Sean Dietrich to speak, we are just in trouble. The first time I ever spoke at a church had to do with a funeral. Now, there was a woman named Miss Murtis, and I've always liked that name. Miss Murtis was the aunt of my good friend Adam. Ab and I grew up fishing along Black Creek in the Choctawhatchee Bay. We would fish the canals that led to the bayou, that led to the bay. And at the end of the day, Miss Murtis, his aunt, who raised him, would call out, "Hey, Adam!" And we would run because we knew that meant food was on its way. And there would be food. She'd be waiting for us on the porch, and she would have cooked cheese sandwiches cut into quarters. While we'd sit, and she'd tell us stories about the old days there in North Walton County, running through the pine forests and the pine straw and the cahaba lilies. And she'd say, "We used to go through and run barefoot, and we'd get the ground ditch. Do you know what the ground ditch is?" And I'd say, "No, ma'am, what's the ground ditch?" She'd say, "Well, you know what hooky is?" I'd say, I don't know, do I?" She said, "Well, it comes out the back end of a dog." I said, "I guess I do." She said, "Well, if you step on that barefoot, you get the ground ditch. That's called ringworm." Miss Murtis was my friend. We'd ride together in her Buick, and she would sing songs to taunt my friend Adam. He was not much of a religious person, but she was. And so she would sing from the hymnal, and she prohibited him from listening to the radio. This would tickle her to no end. She would laugh, and Adam would just get upset because he wanted to hear something more current. When I heard that Miss Murtis had died, it broke my heart. I was in the back of a church just like this, and they said she'd gone on to glory. The funeral was a beautiful service. It was poorly attended, but it was beautiful. And I slipped in toward the back. I sat down with a few of my friends, didn't recognize anybody there. And there was a line forming right here to get up to the pulpit. The pastor announced, "We're not going to be doing eulogies today. At least I'm not. I'm not. But you are. And if you knew Miss Murtis, would you come up here and deliver a few words?" So the eulogies from the laymen were beautiful, poignant, about Miss Murtis's life. I became so overcome with nostalgia that I stood up and I joined that line. And I waited to get up to the stage. After one person told their story, they went and had a seat. Another person got up and told their story, and they went and had a seat. And it was my turn. It was the first time I'd ever spoke like I'm doing now. My hands shook. And they handed me a cordless microphone like this, and I walked around like Katharine Hepburn, shaking. And I told stories about Miss Murtis. I told stories about a woman who grew up in North Walton County, who ran through the longleaf forests and the pine straw and the cahaba lilies, how she would drive in her Buick and sing songs about old-time religion just to spite her nephew, who she raised, who was an orphan. Midway through my talk, which was one of the most beautiful talks I'd ever given, the words just poured from my mouth like poetry. There was a white screen behind me, and there was a bright light at the end of the church, and it was projecting this way. And I held my mic, and I turned behind me, and they rolled photographs of a woman. Something was wrong. I looked forward into the casket, and I realized I'd never seen this woman before in my life. Like any male who digs himself a good hole, I realized I have no choice but to keep talking. So I did. I kept on talking, and I kept on telling stories, and the ones that I didn't know, I just made up. I think I must have spoke for about 12 minutes total. I knew it was my time to quit when a man stood right there in the doorway, and he gave me a look like, "It's time to get off the stage, son." And I hung my head and walked off the stage, and I shook his hand. He said, "I'm Miss Murtis's husband, and who the H-E-double-Q are you?" So, in order to save my pride, I gave him a hug, and I said, "Sir, once you've met one Murtis, you have met them all." truth is, nobody expected a whole lot out of me as far as writing, but I have done my share of writing. I'm ashamed to tell you that I failed the 5th grade. And my teacher, she was a holiness preacher's wife. She wore her hair in a big beehive hairdo, long skirts. And she wouldn't use words like stinks, or I won't even say a few of the others that little boys use. She hated me. I don't know why, but she hated me. And on one recess, I went to my teacher, Mrs. Brewton was her name, and I said, I'd like to be a writer. She said, you would? Well, people in hell would like a glass of ice water. She said, have you been writing anything? I said, yes, ma'am, I have. She said, well, I'd like to see it then. Let's see how good you are. So I had a Red Chief notebook that I'd filled with a No. 1 pencil. Stories about the high seas and shameless vixens, the Old West. And I handed it to her. She brought out a red pen that she hid in her beehive hairdo. And she marked that thing up from top to bottom. She said, I don't know how to tell you this, but you use too many commas. You use the word suddenly an awful lot. It felt very natural. Suddenly this, suddenly that. She said, I believe you have a promising career in construction work. Well, this did crush me because I came from a blue-collar family. My father was a steel worker. He spent his days crawling all over high beams. And I wanted something else for myself. It's not that I didn't like construction work. I just felt I had something else in me. Well, I gave up during that year, the 5th grade. Since that evil little woman didn't like me, I quit trying. On the last day of school, my mother picked me up, and I wanted her to understand, but I knew there were no words to tell her why I had failed the 5th grade. She got hopping mad, and she said, you're going to go to another school next year. It wasn't but a few weeks later she'd organized a meeting with the principal of another school. She drove me across town, walked me inside, and I sat at the principal's desk. And she said, so you failed the 5th grade, huh? I said, I did. She said, well, we've tested you, and we don't think you're too stupid. What do you think would be the reason why you failed the 5th grade? Is there a moment where you can pin it down? I said, yeah, there is. I handed that evil little woman a book, and she told me I was no good, a book of my writing. She said, well, hold on one second. She brought the 6th grade teacher in, Mrs. Dirksen. Mrs. Dirksen terrified me because she also had a beehive hairdo, and I had very bad experiences with beehives. Mrs. Dirksen sat down, and she said, I'd like to see that book. Lucky for me, my mother had brought it. Mrs. Dirksen ran through it with her finger. And she said, well, there's a lot of grammatical mistakes, but I don't think there's a problem here. I think you could be a good writer if you really tried. So she devised a plan. She said, every morning before school, I will let you into the 6th grade and we'll pretend that 5th grade never happened if you will write me 100 words on half a sheet of notebook paper. A story, just like these. And I'll take that notebook paper and I'll grade it. And then I'll place it on a wall behind my desk. And we'll do that every day. I said, what do my stories have to be about? She said, well, they can be about anything. I said, even shameless vixens? She said, let's keep it PG. Thus, every morning I would go to school and I would write a story of 100 words, which is only about a paragraph, 2 small paragraphs. First morning I took it to her and she graded it. She spilt the red ink all over it. She said, okay, this needs a little work. She posted on her wall. Second morning was much the same. Third morning, fourth morning. By the end of the year, we'd reached this side of the bulletin board. And my stories sat there with hardly any red ink on them at all. And on the last day of school, Mrs. Dirksen, with her beehive hairdo, put her arm around me and she said, "Congratulations, you're a writer." This began, I guess, what you can call a career for me. It was the first time someone had truly believed in me. Years later, I was going to the Piggly Wiggly and I had a bag of beef jerky in my hand. Don't ask me why I remember that, but I do. And I walked toward the front of the store and I saw something over the partitions that divide the checkout aisles. It was hair, tall hair, like a holiness preacher wife would wear. I took my chances and I went through that line. And I waited. And when I got closer, I could see my fifth grade teacher. She was ringing up groceries. And I've never been so glad to see a woman wear a red apron at a Piggly Wiggly in all my life. I waited patiently, and when it was my turn, I came up and I put my stuff on the conveyor belt. And she said, "Sean, it's you." And I said, "It is." She came around and we hugged. And it was beautiful. Because I got this sense that, yes, she was a spiteful little woman. But she was trying her best at life just like anybody else. Just to make enough money to make ends meet. Her husband's church had folded. And she'd gotten let go from the school. I wonder why. So here she was at Piggly Wiggly ringing up groceries. And I felt love toward her for the first time in a long time. She said, "What is it you do for a living?" I said, "Well, I work in construction." Thus, I guess you could call me a writer now. The first thing that I did when they asked me to speak here at this Methodist church was to tap an informational resource which is near and dear to my heart. Before I tell you much about her, I should say that she was born only 4 houses over, inside the house, back in a time when you could be born inside a house. And she is my good friend. And I will read you a story about her that I wrote. My mother-in-law fell yesterday. She stumbled in the garage, and it was bad. She smacked her face on the pavement, and she busted her glasses in her nose. When I found her, she was bleeding. "We're going to the ER," I said. "I feel lightheaded," said Scarlett O'Hara. "Yes, ma'am, here, take my arm." "Wait, I need to brush my teeth before I go." "Ma'am, you're bleeding everywhere, everywhere. These shoes don't match my blouse. Give me the blue shoes from the closet." "But ma'am, this is an emergency. And my lipstick. I need my lipstick. Don't forget my pearls." "Ma'am, here are your shoes." "No, the sling black ones, the blue sling back ones." Mother Mary is what I call her, and I have called her that ever since our very first supper together. And that was a long time ago. I'm longer in the tooth now, but I remember the first meal. It was rump roast, served with enough trimmings to make the table buckle. For dessert, we had pear salad. Half a pear, topped with 1 cup of mayonnaise. And 1 slice of American cheese, topped with a cherry. I ate every bite, but you should know that I'd rather lick a possum in the ear than eat pear salad like that. Even so, That night, Mother Mary and I discovered that we liked each other. She told me to call her that, Mother Mary, and it's all I've ever called her. Before she was my mother-in-law, I visited once to take her daughter on a movie date. Mother Mary's husband answered the door, holding a 12-gauge shotgun. He spoke loud and he said, "Jamie's mama is out on the pier fishing and Jamie's upstairs." Okay. So he led me out to the pier where they were fishing. Mother Mary was engaged in a vicious fight with a redfish about the size of my leg. She was working the rod and reel like an expert angler, and I had never seen such from a woman. She started screaming, just like Scarlett O'Hara would. "I got one!" And she said a few other words that I won't tell you she said. Without saying a word, my wife's daddy, who I call Brother Jim, aimed a 12-gauge shotgun at the water. And he unloaded 2 explosions and 10 cuss words. They reeled in the fish, and I was terrified of that man. So when he suggested we cancel our movie date, I said, "Whatever you want, sir." We did. We canceled our movie date and we ate with my wife's parents. Fried fish with hush puppies, French fries, okra, and just about anything her daddy could shove into a deep fryer. And I'm hard-pressed to remember having a better time, ever. And if I didn't know better, I would have sworn these people actually cared about me. Then, Mother Mary brought out pear salad. And I tried my best to get it down. Anyway, after our ER visit today, Mother Mary sat in a recliner with a bandaged face. Her wrist is purple and her face is swollen. And she is tired. But by God, she is tough. This Bellevue Avenue belle grew up in a time of cotton dresses, bare feet, and decency. She is Methodist. From her birth, she was christened in the church right next door to her house. She has survived a handful of dear friends, 13 U.S. presidents, and 1 late husband who fished with firearms. Mother Mary has 1 titanium hip, a crippling onset of rheumatism, and an accent that sounds like an azalea bush. She brings Brewton, Alabama into any room she enters, and anyone fortunate enough to hear her say at least 3 words often ends up smiling. She can arrange flowers. She can paint with oils. In fact, there's one painting of a clown in my bedroom that disturbs me, but she painted it. She can write thank yous until dawn, and she can sing any Hank Williams tune you call. The doctor did CAT scans and x-rays and other tests, and the young physician remarked that he had never in his whole life seen a patient with cleaner teeth and a nicer set of lipstick. That fool didn't even mention her pearls. "I broke my glasses falling," said Miss Mary, covering her bruised face. "They were expensive glasses." Well, glasses are cheap, but there will never be another Mary Finley Martin. You can clap for me if you will. I have one story to read to you. Speaking of the Finleys, they're cornerstones of this church, and I'm proud to be related to them. I have interviewed my mother-in-law extensively before I put this together, and you are the first people to hear what I'm about to read. I'm fascinated with the history of this city, and I'm fascinated with the people therein. So journey with me, if you will, to Brewton, 1927. 1927. This is the golden age of radio. Babe Ruth is the man of the world. Newspapers dominate the informational waves. The streets in this small town are minuscule. There are big glass shop windows with frilly letters on them. The woman I'm talking to you about is South Carolinian. Her mother died when she was 12. It was a traumatic and a slow death. Tuberculosis is no way to watch your mother go. And 12 years old is far too young to lose a mother. It's when you need your mother the most. It's when you're going through changes. It's when you're finding out who you will be. They moved to Alabama, Lafayette. The girl grew up raising chickens, and she could sew, but she could do a whole lot of other things too. She could rescreen windows, fix leaky faucets, cut grass, paint rooms, paint houses, garden, and do just about anything that requires a barn. And she was smart, lightning smart. When she attended the University of Alabama, she impressed her instructors. She could work through algebra problems even faster than their professors could. So it was only natural that she would take up teaching. She took a job in a small community many people outside of Brewton, Alabama have never heard of, Damascus. A place not much bigger than an area rug. The day she arrived at the train depot, it was to a crowd of young men. The train depot was obviously the main attraction in this one-horse town. Every day, young men lingered nearby to catch glimpses of the cute young women stepping off the train, and that was their entertainment. On the day the girl arrived, there are teams of boys in cotton shirts and straw skimmer hats. They're standing with goofy smiles and a hat in their hand, fanning their face, because this is South Alabama, and it is hot. She sees him sweating through his shirt. He's a stocky-built fella, and he's fanning himself like he's in church. She steps onto the platform, and she is young. She's dark-headed, and her eyes just seem to smile on their own. He sees her first before any of the other women. He follows her. He removes his hat, and he tries to strike up a conversation, but it doesn't work. She doesn't want anything to do with him because she's already engaged to a man in Lafayette. This doesn't dissuade him at all. She's 19, a college student at the University of Alabama. She has her whole life ahead of her. She teaches in the school year, but attends college during the summer. She's a workaholic. She's a genuine grade A go-getter. He is 23. He has a stain on his shirt, and he's loud, and he smells funny, and he uses words that are not fit for a setting like what I'm reading in. Even so, he invites her to church. Well, I'm Presbyterian, she says. So he invites her to supper. Well, I'm busy. Sorry. He asks if she wants to go fishing, and she looks at him and she says, "Beg your pardon?" This woman is a heartbreaker, and he is learning it the hard way. She moves into a boarding house, like all the teachers do. It's a small place with plastered walls and heart pine floors from the Longleafs right up the road. She's room with a girl, her roommate, and her share a bathroom. They stay up late and they talk, and in 1927, 19-year-old girls are only interested in a few things: boys, face makeup, and boys. The gentlemen callers come by the dozen. They wear out the door buzzer at the boarding house, calling on the young women. One night he calls for her, and she's in a good mood. She agrees to spend some time with him, even though she's not looking for anything serious. He's funny, this man. He has a way with words, even if they're foul words. They begin courting, because that's what they called it back then. They go to field parties where folks pass around fruit jars. There are dances on dusty floors, joints way out in the woods that would become to be known as honky-tonks in this part of the world. Then they'd go to Methodist covered dish suppers, and they'd eat until they're sick. They'd sit together on the tailgate of a Model T truck, and they'd listen to a choir of frogs around a pond, the simple pleasures of South Alabama. And at Christmas time, it's warm. It Don't feel like Christmas at all, except for the exceptional hunting. They say someone nailed a 76-pound coon over in Kego. That joker looked like he had swallowed a litter of pound cakes. It's 1927. You'll have to pardon. The young men are only interested in a few things like hunting, girls, and hunting. A handful of young men during Christmas time sneak into the boarding house where the teachers are. On Christmas Eve, they leave gifts beneath the tree, brooches, necklaces, hairpins, books, and since everyone in the entire world smokes, cigarette cases. But really, they were just things anyone could buy at the mercantile. On Christmas morning, the girls find their gifts. The boarding house lights up with youthful enjoyment. But she can't find anything under the tree. And she is hot. Because she's been courting that joker for a long time. And he forgot her on Christmas. That afternoon, he shows up on the porch unexpected. She don't want to talk to him. She's cold. He looks through the window at the skinny tree, and he says, "Didn't anyone leave you a gift?" She doesn't answer him. She lights another cigarette and looks away. No gifts? My, how cruel. Didn't you get anything on this blessed Christmas morning? She's getting madder by the second. So he sits beside her, and she's about to let him have it. But he interrupts her. "What's that?" he says, pointing through the window at the tree. Then he stands and he walks to the tree. He reaches into the high branches, and on the top limb is a gold wristwatch. The nicest gift any of the girls have received. My, he says, "I wonder who this is for." And then he places it on her hand. Love. Not so different in 1927. They were married in 31. She taught at W.S. Neal on the weekends. She taught at W.S. Neal on the weekdays. But she taught at the Methodist church right behind me on Sundays. Truckloads of students who would wander through her doors remember her for her kindness. One man remembers struggling with math. I met this man. He made D's and F's. He expected this teacher to be angry with him, but she wasn't. One day during class, she walked the rows of desks and she stood beside him and she said, "Glenn, you need to quit trying so hard because I don't care what grade you make. I'm just glad you're here." He made C's after that. Another woman remembers sitting in her English class listening to her teacher read, and it was like hearing Scarlett O'Hara, this woman said. Her voice was the kind all of our mothers wanted us to have. It was prim and it was proper. And I used to stand in front of the mirror and practice talking just like Miss Finley did. Another man says, "Well, we all had crushes on her. When she was younger, we couldn't understand why in the devil she was with that sloppy man of hers. Why, do you know that when he would wash his truck behind the hardware store, he would open it with both doors and spray the seats off with a garden hose?" One white-haired man recalls, after the war, Miss Finley had several adult men in her class. They were veterans who'd fought overseas. Those men had gone through a lot. They had a hard time keeping their mind on school. Even so, they wanted their education, and they were older than she was. She was as sweet to them as their own mother. Well, some women are born to be mothers. Others are born to be mother to many. Those women, I guess, are called teachers. At nighttime, when she got much older, her husband and her would make the painful walk upstairs. Stairs got harder to climb the older she got. Their bed was a single bed and a double bed pushed together, just so they could be near each other. When they got too old to climb the stairs, they traded their upstairs beds for hospital beds on the bottom floor. Their daughters took turns watching them on shifts. Watching parents age is a lot like watching a rose get taken by the frost. He died in October. She died a month later. They found her in the fetal position. They'd been trying to feed her for weeks, and the food kept dribbling down her lips. It was a graveside service, and I understand it was something else. The Methodist preacher said a few words, and people stood around her grave wearing their Sunday best. Most of the people are people who have sat in these very pews. Former students, veterans, shopkeepers, mill workers, hunters, fishermen, high school athletes, children, grandchildren, and friends. She was a good teacher, said one man. She was a mother to every child in her classroom, and that's how things are in this town. We look after our own. Everybody's mother looks after everybody else's kid. Mother's Day is a lot more than Mother's Day in Brewton, Alabama. And when Brewton loses a woman like that, it's like losing 200 mothers at once. Well, I couldn't say it any better than Mother Mary did. And even if I could, I wouldn't want to. Would you bow your heads with me in prayer? Dear God, thank you for our mothers. Thank you for my mother, who grew up without, who did without, who raised me on her own, who worked hard every day of her life. Thank you for my mother-in-law, Miss Mary, who loves me like her own. Thank you for the women of this town, the ones in poverty and the ones in financial prosperity. We pray that this day would be a day where they would shine and be the most special human being this side of the Wiregrass region. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Thank you for having me today. It's been a pleasure.